So I saw something that was a little concerning to me. I've watched all of the various pundits at the Daily Wire, and some of them will have, ideas that I agree with, or they're very entertaining. Some of them have ideas I don't agree with, and some of them are just completely off-putting to me. There's people like I've mentioned before, Andrew Klavan, I think, when I hear him talk about he's a novelist and an Edgar-winning novelist at that, and when I hear him talk about the craft of writing, I could listen to that stuff, his insights into writing for hours, irrespective of our political differences. So there's people like that that are, are engaging and have interesting ideas. And then there'll be people that I find completely and instantly repugnant, like Candace Owens, who, far from being the token outreach to black conservatism, is actually just a prop for conservative white men to say, "Don't worry, my black friend says it's okay." So they have different attitudes, different ideas. But I'll listen to the Daily Wire mainly because it's a good way to get my finger on the pulse of conservative thought without having to go to Fox News, where all of the anchors and all of the hosts always seem like they're about to jump forward and bite you. Anyway, one person that I had not really paid much attention to for a while was Brett Cooper. And mainly because, aside from admittedly being smoking hot, I saw her as not really speaking to my demographic. I could tell that her purpose was to offer a young, college-age take on conservative issues and conservative talking points and that kind of thing. But I've watched her more and more recently, and she said something that's very concerning to me, which was in relationship to Michael Knowles' now infamous comment about eradicating transgender ideology. She described Michael Knowles as being one of the kindest people that she knows. And I have to say, Brett is certainly a very intelligent young woman, and certainly very insightful and eloquent in her own right, and she carries herself well, and she's apparently in law school, and I think she'll probably do well at that down the line. So, in general, as just a quality of human being, I think she's doing well. But there is this tremendous naivete that emerges from her periodically, and calling Michael Knowles a kind person is just a perfect example of that. Because, and I say this, yes, granted, this is someone she probably interacts with around the office every day versus someone who I've only seen in televised segments or YouTube segments and that sort of thing. But I can say, just from looking at, analyzing the man and listening to his viewpoints and everything, Michael Knowles is not a kind person. Michael Knowles is a very, very polite and very charming person. And that is that is very important to take note of, because truly evil people are nearly always go out of their way to cultivate a persona of being extremely polite, extremely eloquent, and extremely charming, and they devote a tremendous amount of time to superficial things like their dress and appearance and that sort of thing, and their appearance of refinement and things like that. There is a reason that the Rolling Stones song "Sympathy for the Devil" begins with, "Please allow me to introduce myself, I'm a man of wealth and taste." That is Michael Knowles. That is Michael Knowles to a T. I have watched him, plenty of his content now, and I have noticed an ongoing trend, which is that the only time that you will ever see that man express true joy, true happiness, a true sense of elation, and just jubilant fulfillment in a sense of life and all of that, is when he is talking about things that will harm other people and cause pain and suffering in the world. Watch and consistently this is what happens. I did a previous video where I talked about his tone, the way he talks. He sounds like fascist Jerry Seinfeld. But he started talking about people who want to dress in drag, that he thinks they should be put in prison simply for wearing gender nonconforming clothing. And the way he was carrying on, this was the first thing I'd ever seen him seen of his, really. But he was talking about how he said, we need to say, no, we're not gonna let you do that. And he just was filled with this, he's normally this person who's very intense and very haughty, and then he just becomes filled with this wide-eyed, childlike sense of joy when it comes to the thought of locking people up for living a lifestyle or presenting in a manner that he does not approve of. And so it's that was further compacted when, and this is why his views are and responding to his views are important to me. When he started talking about the forced the forced assignment of people he perceives as being mentally unwell, forcing them into mental institutions and into insane asylums and that sort of thing, he talked about how there was a time when when he says we, he always just means the cultural establishment of society. He says there was a time when people were behaving like, he uses Dylan Mulvaney as an example, there was a time when people like Dylan Mulvaney started behaving the way they did. We locked them up. We put them in straitjackets and padded cells, and Dylan Mulvaney would be much happier there. And he keeps saying we need to go back and start putting people away. And he said we stopped doing that for some reason. For some reason, by the way, Michael, that you're referring to is that in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan decided that mental health facilities were not something the taxpayer would pay for, and that is why you see this massive swath of so-called crazy homeless people out on the street, because the Gipper decided that we weren't going to pay for that anymore, and he just kicked all those people out on the street. But that's the for some reason you're referring to. But anyway, what Michael Knowles is calling for, him being supposedly a devout Catholic, but devout in his Catholicism only when it is an opportunity to cause pain and harm to other people. He does not seem to have any regard for Catholic outreaches of Catholic charity, or feeding the poor and the hungry, or providing for the needy and that sort of thing, or doing anything of greater moral good other than invoking his Catholicism as a means to cause pain and consternation and suffering in the world. But he goes on, what he's doing there in invoking Catholicism that way, you have to remember that for many, many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, the only thing that was available in terms of mental health care was confinement to institutions, insane asylums that were run by the church. And there was no concept, and these things were going back hundreds and hundreds of years with this practice. There was no concept of counseling or therapy or medication or anything that would actually restore these people to some degree of functionality. There was just the very arcane or very archaic and outdated belief that these people, if they were behaving in this manner, must be possessed by demons or something like that. And the church was very happy to inflict all manner of suffering and torment and torture on these people in the interest of driving out demons. And that really and truly is the world and the worldview that Michael Knowles is espousing when he wants to go back to that. And so that is very, very concerning to me as someone who's an advocate for mental health care, because we have come so far in the course of, we have come so far in terms of destigmatizing mental health care to where, I can remember in my own generation, just my own generation growing up, if you had any kind of mental health issues, you kept that shit to yourself and you made damn sure nobody knew about it and everything. the um, I you know, I can remember like when I remember was in junior high, there was one kid that word got out that he was seeing a therapist after school for some issue, and it was this thing that, you know, that people whispered about and that kind of thing. It was that level, and that recently ago, 20 some odd years ago. So it's been in my lifetime that we've seen tremendous strides forward in terms of the acceptance of mental health care as a normal facet of life. And Michael Knowles wants to re-stigmatize it and return it to something that is used as a basis for confining people against their will, locking them up, and that sort of thing. And I say that because there is I will acknowledge there is even a kernel of truth in what he's basing that on. I do think that someone like Dylan Mulvaney, I think that Dylan Mulvaney is obviously suffering from some very real mental health disorders that are not getting treated. I don't think that it's appropriate for the poster child for cluster B personality disorders to be raking in millions and millions of dollars in ad revenue for his bonkers behavior and sponsorships and everything else. These are very real concerns, especially the social contagion factor that he's having, where he's influencing other people to launch these day whatever of whatever performance art routines. So I acknowledge all of that, but the solution is not to implement a draconian policy that confines people to an archaic version of mental health facilities against their will. Anyway, that's a side tangent on that, though, because as one of the big things that I noticed coming back to the idea of Michael Knowles being pure evil and being an agent of evil and an evil entity is look at, and I'm not asking you to agree with Matt Walsh when I make this comparison. That's not what I'm putting on the table. I just want you to take note of the demeanor with which both of these people, the demeanor that each of these men takes on when they weigh in on the same issue. Recently, Michael Knowles caused a tremendous amount of noise and hubbub when he referred to the eradication of trans ideology, which is what Brett Cooper was responding to when she was talking about him being one of the kindest people that she knows. And Michael Knowles is not an idiot. He knows full well the implications of the word eradicate. He knows full well how people are going to respond to that. He knows full well that if he had said something like we need to commit to the full and complete refutation of transgender ideology, something that's made it clear that he was speaking specifically to the word ideology, to counteracting the ideology itself, he would not have gotten the reaction that he did. He's not an idiot. He knows full well that the word eradicate is going to fill people's heads with images of genocide and concentration camps and forced sterilizations and all sorts of other things, and that people are going to start reacting very badly and in many ways very violently in protest to use of a word like that. And when he did his campus appearance immediately following that, he had his camera crews and everything ready to capture the chaos and the madness of all of the people that he had provoked with, all the people wishing him death and screaming at him and causing chaos in the halls and him needing armed security and that sort of thing to get to the podium and all of that. And the whole time that he's being led through the angry mobs of protesters by armed security and everything, it's not even like he's quietly smirking to himself like he's the cat that caught the cream, the cat that got the cream. He is grinning from ear to ear and just chuckling like a fucking villain at the way that the way he's carrying himself, the way this is going on. He is genuinely amused, and he has this thing where when people come up and get angry at him, he starts chuckling, and he does this kind of sort of thing. This is the demeanor of somebody who is carrying himself as an agent of chaos and knows that he is an agent of chaos and is trying to function in that way. That is the behavior of a fundamentally evil, dare I say, a fundamentally devilish person. And you might want to say, well, he's a committed Catholic, to which I would quote Tom Waits and say, the devil knows the Bible like the back of his hand. Contrast that with Matt Walsh, and I say this, I saw Matt Walsh's recent appearance at, I believe it was the Young America's Foundation, but it was it's the one where he, if you want to look it up on YouTube, it's the one where he talked to the transgender EMT. That clip is making the rounds. But anyway, you look at the presentation of that appearance. Is there any glorification of the riots and chaos? No. Does Matt Walsh appear to be relishing the negative attention? Does he appear to be joyful and gleeful in response to the negative attention? No. In fact, if you watch, he very obviously starts leaning on the podium. It's starting to wear on him over time. The negativity, admirably, he remains unflappable. I don't think I could have been so reserved in all of that, but there's no glorification of the chaos. Any screaming and yelling you hear happens off camera, and it's very quickly nullified. And that is a very different, again, I'm not asking you to agree with him. I'm just pointing out this is a very different type of a person. Using Dylan Mulvaney as an example, Matt Walsh also recently went off on Dylan Mulvaney with the whole with this very harsh rebuke, but that has also gone viral. But that harsh rebuke does not sound like a person who is filled with joy and glee at the thought of causing all of this pain and chaos in the world. It sounds like somebody who is very frustrated and very irritated at something that he doesn't agree with. But it does not sound like, it's not the guy that's getting up there and saying, we need to say, no, we're not going to let you do that, And that is so, that is just so worrying to see somebody that, again, I can't diagnose anybody, but again, Michael Knowles seems like the poster child for dark triad characteristics. To see somebody like that being given that degree of power and influence. Obviously, the Daily Wire is never going to curtail the degree of influence that he has because he makes them tremendous amounts of money. But it is just very important as a character study in evil, I think, to look at Michael Knowles. And before you say, well, I think that's being unfair to Michael Knowles, et cetera, remember that the only reaction he would have if he heard me say that is, so there you go.